BBC Coventry and Warwickshire.
Back in May, a wonderful author joined me on the show to tell me about a book that she'd written that was inspired by her experiences as a child refugee. So we talked about that. And then since then, she's written another book that celebrates local radio. And that book inspired by when she came in on this show. And I can't wait to talk to her about the book and find out exactly why she decided to put this book. Now, cast your mind back. That's if you were listening back then. Cast your mind back to May. I had a visit from an author in Rugby who'd written a book for children about refugees. That's because she herself was a refugee from the Soviet Union as a child. Turns out she loves to write about her experiences that she's had, and that's because after visiting me in this radio studio, she decided that she wanted to write another book celebrating the history of local radio. Julie Fox is the lady in question, and she joins me on the show now. Hello, Julie. Lovely to see you again.
Good afternoon, Brody. So wonderful to see you too.
Well, look, I love the fact that you've written a book inspired by your visit to the studio. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But what we need to do, let's go back to the beginning, because I really enjoyed talking to you last time and talking about your history. So let's go back to May this year when you were on the show, and you'd written a book about refugees for children. Tell me about that.
Well, I was a refugee myself, a child refugee, more than 25 years ago now. I was a teenager. I had a young brother, and our family were political refugees from Soviet Union. I got political asylum in the United States. About 2 years ago, when Syrian refugee crisis and the fates of Syrian children were in the media 24/7 pretty much, I started having flashbacks to the final days of my family back in my country and when we were leaving the country, and the hardships that myself and my brother back then faced. Not as horrible as the Syrian children did, because there was no war back then, but still quite traumatic for children or teenagers to leave their homes forever. We were packing our bags, we were deciding on what to take with us or what to leave behind. And that was the theme of the book that I've done two years ago.
So who were you hoping that book would appeal to? Was it kids in this country, or was it to help you with the experience? Well,
it was primarily done for the children nowadays who have no idea what refugee children are going through. Their parents might explain to them, but their parents might not know very well. And I thought the best way of introducing them to the topic was to actually show them how a child refugee is packing his bag and what he has to leave behind. And this is the great way to help them understand what it is to part with your home and with your toys forever.
It's a lovely thing that you did it, and you did it in such a great way to make it easy for the kids to understand. And when did you first start writing as well as an author? When did you first start here putting pen to paper?
Well, I've been writing since I was a child, but it was not the children's stories that I was writing. I was trained as a journalist. It was mainly articles. I was writing lots of poetry, but never a child's story up until 2 years ago. I have no idea how it happened to me. Potentially, it was probably desire to explain the theme of refugees to my niece and nephew, who are about the same age as my brother and I were when we left the country. I thought, well, they were born in the safety of the new country, United States. They never had any hardships. They have no idea what today's children are going through. I've got to explain it to them what their father and myself went through. And then it's just turned out that other children were benefiting from this as well.
And how different is it writing a book for a kid compared to writing one for an adult? Because it's got to be a completely different experience for you, hasn't it? Because you've got to think like a child, haven't you?
Absolutely. You somehow have to go back to the times when you were a child. So you've got to remove all the adulthood years that you've had, kind of force yourself back into that thinking mode, and then imagine the world the way you used to imagine it when you were 5, 6, 7 years of age. And it turned out it's not easily done, but there is some kind of a button inside you that if you push it, you can do it. It's like a time travel. And I've managed to push it, and now I can't stop.
It's pouring out of you.
Yes, it is.
Pouring out of
Everywhere I go, I see a story.
Well, look, we're going to talk about this in just a second, but the last time you were on here then was in May, and I loved talking to you. Fascinating story, loved the way you put your books together. And you came in the show and you thought, that's a great idea for a book. Right back to my special guest this afternoon, then, author Julie Fox. Now, she joined me on the show back in May this year to tell me about the book that she'd written at the time. And inspired by her visit, she's decided to write another book that I've got in my hand here. So tell me why you decided to write this book then, Julie. How did that all happen?
Well, about the same time that I came here in May, I started a new project of writing books for local businesses, explaining children the trades that the local towns were involved with. And I was sitting here and looking at all the equipment and you and thinking, well, I can't forget the radio. I mean, if I'm writing about the bakery and the gelateria and the local restaurant, then how about the radio? Radio has to be mentioned. So I went home, I looked up, and I realized that on November 14th, we're going to be celebrating 95 years from the first BBC's broadcast in London in 1922.
Brilliant. So that's where you got the idea from. And I have to say, and I'm looking in this book now, it reminds me of the kind of kids' books that I used to read when I was little as well, growing up in the 1970s. Was that intentional for it to look a bit retro?
Absolutely. I have an amazing illustrator, Lika Kvirikashvili. She lives in Georgia. And I told her to go back to the books that she used to grow up with and her parents used to read when they were little, and to pay special attention to the colors and the pictures and try to recreate that, because if we're writing the book about the history of radio, then we want the illustrations to be authentic. And that's what she did. Lika is absolutely amazing.
And also, did you get whoever made these books to get that authentic smell as well? Because when I smell this book, it takes me back to when I was a kid.
Yes, you can add it as an extra on Amazon checkout. Just put extra smell.
Yeah, tick the extra box for that. And what would you say features in this book then? How would you describe it? As in the topics that appear in the book? Well,
the topics is basically the history of the radio. How would you present it to the kids in an entertaining way? Because if you just say, well, let's talk about the history and then start just going through facts, is one thing. But then you put a cat and in the middle of that story, and make him a host, and the cat who looks peculiarly like you.
Well, we need to talk about this, because I was looking at him and I was thinking, this cat looks like it could be a cat that I would buy, a cat that I would own, and you've based him on me, haven't you?
Yes, I based him on you, and then I just thought, let's just make it all about cats, and let's cats present the story, and that's how I did it. The cat is the Tommy the Learned Cat, and she's the host of the show, and basically as he goes through his broadcast, he introduces important topics about how the radio was invented, the history of the BBC, the first programs for children that BBC presented, like the Children's Hour, just those important things.
Oh, it's lovely. And we need to mention my producer, Magic Liz, as well, because you've got a character in here that looks like her as well.
Absolutely, and she's talking to the host. So it's totally authentic. And if you read the book, that you would pretty much imagine the show itself, because it's a conversation between the host and the news person and a producer. Just everything is very authentic. It's just the cats
lovely.
Are doing it, not the humans.
It's lovely. Radio Cat, Tommy the Learned Cat, goes to the BBC. And if anybody wants to get their hands on this, how can they go about getting it?
Amazon sites all over the world, England, United States, France, it's listed there. So you can just go there and purchase it. In England, it's on amazon.co.uk, $6.99.
Now, what is next for you? Because you talked about this. You soak up ideas wherever you go, don't you? So you'll be walking out of here and get soaked by the rain, and that'll give you an idea to write a book. It's true, though, isn't it? So what's next for you? What's next on the book front?
Very important project, as England right now are welcoming lots of newcomers from different parts of the world, including refugees. Involved right now with the Refugees Welcome in Rugby communal organization. We're writing a book about welcoming newcomers to rugby, and the book is going to feature the history of rugby and important things that are happening in town and basic information for people who are coming.
Oh,
the
well,
country.
listen, it sounds a wonderful thing you're doing. And I wish you all the very best with it, because I think you do some very special things with your book. You try and make a difference with them. That's the point. That's the point, isn't it?
Yes, all proceeds from sale of the books, as long as the books themselves are donated to different charities supporting children refugees all over the world, not just Syria, because Syria is at the focus of the attention now. But children refugees are affected from Sudan, from Ukraine, from Iraq, many countries.
Absolutely. Julie, it's been a pleasure to see you, and I wish you all the very best with this book. Thank you for joining us on BBC Coventry and Warwickshire.
Thank you so much, Brody.